What if Emperor Qin Shi Huang, the one who unified China and ordered the construction of the Great Wall, had not just left behind a bunch of clay soldiers, but laid the foundation for an eternal empire? Imagine for a second, what if the Qin Dynasty had not collapsed a few years after his death, but had flourished for centuries? Would we now be drinking tea from cups labeled "Made in Qin"? Would schools teach not Greek philosophy, but the sayings of some court sage from Shandong? The paradox is that we consider history to be something set in stone, but if one emperor lived a couple of years longer or one uprising failed to take place, our world could look so different that you wouldn't even recognize your own reflection in the mirror. Why is this topic worth your attention at all? Because the Qin Dynasty is not just a couple of pages in a textbook. It was the moment when China, from a handful of warring states, became the only force that could dictate the rules of the game on the entire continent. The irony is that Qin Shi Huang, whom we know as a tyrant with delusions of grandeur, seriously, who builds an army out of terracotta for the afterlife, created a system that could have overturned the world order. But his empire crumbled faster than you can say bureaucracy. What if it hadn't? What if Qin had not just unified China, but had gone further? To the west? To the south? Anywhere? And most importantly, how would this have changed us? This story is not just another what if. It is a chance to look into an alternative world where everything could have gone differently. We will walk through how one small change in the 3rd century BC could have reshaped the world map, culture, technology, and even what we eat for breakfast. It will be fun, a little ironic, because how can you not make fun of an emperor who was afraid of death but did not foresee that his son would not pull the reins of the empire? So sit back, pour yourself a cup of coffee, or tea if you're in the spirit of ancient China, and let's figure out what would have happened if the Qin Dynasty hadn't fallen. I warn you, it will be harder to tear yourself away from this story than from your favorite TV series. So let's go back to 210 BC. Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, has just died. Well, in our reality at least. But let's imagine he's not in a hurry to die. Let's say he avoids the poisonous mercury pills that are rumored to have sent him back to his ancestors. Or maybe his eldest son Fusu, who is smart and sensible, doesn't fall prey to intrigue and takes over from the younger Hu Hai, who, let's be honest, wasn't the brightest star in the dynasty's sky. In our alternate history, Fusu becomes the 2nd emperor, and instead of drowning in rebellion and chaos, the Qin dynasty begins to grow stronger. The first thing Fusu does is soften his father's draconian laws. Qin Shi Huangdi was certainly a genius at unification, but his penchant for executions and forced labor on the wall didn't win him any fans. Fusu, like a good PR manager, reduces taxes and stops sending peasants to their deaths for holding a shovel incorrectly. The irony is that while in real history the peasants were preparing their pitchforks for rebellion, here they suddenly decide, you know, this Qin isn't so bad after all. Stability returns, and China, instead of falling apart, begins to expand. By 200 BC, Qin no longer simply holds China in its fist, but looks to its neighbors. To the north are the nomads, who in real history have become a problem for all Chinese dynasties. But Fusu doesn't just strengthen the Great Wall, he goes on the offensive. Imagine a Chinese army armed with crossbows, which, by the way, Qin had perfected during his father's lifetime, crushes nomadic tribes and advances all the way to modern-day Mongolia. Instead of fending off raids for centuries, Qin incorporates these territories into the empire. Ironically, the nomads who in our history created empires like the Mongols become just another provincial district of the Qin. In the south, the Qin seizes territory in modern-day Vietnam and even encroaches on northern India. In real history, the Mauryan Empire of India is flourishing at this time. But here the Qin, with its iron discipline and vast resources, repels the Mauryans. Ashoka, the famous Indian emperor, who in reality converted to Buddhism and preached peace, is forced to fight the Chinese armies in this story. And guess what? He loses. By 150 BC, northern India had become part of the Qin Empire, and Buddhism, instead of spreading eastward, had fallen under the influence of the Chinese bureaucracy. Imagine Buddhist monks taking civil service exams. Isn't that ridiculous? In the West, the Qin reached Central Asia. In real history, these lands were controlled by Scythians and other nomads, but here the Chinese army, with its standardized weapons and logistics, simply crushed everyone. By 100 BC, the Qin had established trade routes that we would call the Silk Road in reality, but here it was simply the Qin Highway. The irony is that the Romans, who were just beginning their conquests at that time, suddenly discovered that there was an empire to the east that was not only as good as them, but also superior in organization. Imagine a Roman senator receiving a silk toga labeled Made in Qin and grumbling that those Orientals have flooded the market. And what about inside the empire? Qin Shi Huangdi standardized everything from writing to the width of chariots during his lifetime. In this story, Fusu and his successors go further. By 100 BC, China had not only a single script, but also a developed education system. Confucianism, which in real history became the basis of Chinese culture only during the Han Dynasty, is combined here with Qin legalism. The result is an interesting mix. A philosophy that teaches harmony plus iron discipline. Imagine Chinese officials quoting Confucius, but at the same time fining them for improperly parking their chariots. Technologically, the Qin are ahead of everyone. Crossbows become even more deadly, and the empire's engineers improve the irrigation systems that make China the breadbasket of the world. By 50 BC, the first prototypes of paper appear, a century earlier than in real history. And because the Qin controls Central Asia, they gain access to new metals and technologies that allow them to create stronger armor and even primitive cannons. Yes, cannons. Not gunpowder artillery, like in the Middle Ages, but something like a ballista that throws iron balls. The Romans, by the way, when they first encountered these things around 50 AD, decide that it is better to trade with the Qin than to fight. Culture changes too. In real history, Qin Shi Huang burned books and did not particularly like the intelligentsia. But Fusu, as we remember, is smarter. He encouraged scholars, and by the 1st century AD, China had become a center of learning and art. Imagine Chinese poems being read in Persia, or Buddha statues with Qin Shi Huang's features. The irony is that an emperor who in reality feared dissent becomes a symbol of cultural flourishing. Now let's fast forward a couple of centuries. By 200 AD, the Qin Empire is a superpower, stretching from the Pacific Ocean to the Caspian Sea. The Roman Empire, which in real history was the main power of the West, is forced to share the world with the Qin. Christianity, which in our reality has become the dominant religion, is competing with Buddhism and Confucianism, which the Qin actively promote. Imagine the cathedral in Constantinople, but instead of a cross on the dome, there is the Chinese character for harmony. Funny, right? By 500 AD, the Qin begin to colonize new lands. They discover Japan, but instead of leaving it alone, they incorporate it into the empire. Samurai? Forget it. Instead, Chinese officials appear in Japan, teaching the locals to write in hieroglyphs and build canals. And it's not far from America. Imagine Chinese junks sailing to California around 700 AD. Native Americans are greeted not by Spanish conquistadors, but by Chinese bureaucrats with papers and seals. Congratulations, you are now part of the Qin Empire. Here is your corn tax. So, what do we have? The world where the Qin Dynasty did not fall is a world where China is not just one of the players, but the chief conductor of the world orchestra. From Mongolia to Mexico, people write in hieroglyphics, quote Confucius, and drink tea from cups with the Qin Incorporated logo. The Roman Empire? It exists, but more as a junior partner that supplies olive oil and grumbles that Chinese goods have flooded the market. Europe? It never became the center of the world, because the Qin was ahead of everyone in technology, trade, and even fashion. Imagine medieval knights wearing silk robes instead of armor. But the most interesting thing is how it makes us think about our real world. We are used to believing that history is something unshakable, but all it took was for one emperor to live a little longer, one son to be a little smarter, and everything would have gone differently. Maybe we wouldn't be arguing about politics over coffee, but would be taking exams in Confucianism to get promoted at work. Or instead of the internet, we would use the Qin postal network. Imagine pigeons with hieroglyphics instead of emails. Funny, but a little creepy, right? This story shows how fragile our world is. One turn and we could be living in a different reality. The irony is that Qin Shi Huang, whom we consider a tyrant, could have become the father of a world where order and discipline triumphed over chaos. Would it have been better? Who knows? But it would definitely be interesting to try to live in such a world for at least a day. If you enjoyed thinking about how one small change could have reshaped the whole of history, please like this video. It's a signal that you're ready for more what ifs. And subscribe, because there are many more stories ahead that you won't be able to put down. Let's figure out together how history could have turned out. In the meantime, pour yourself some more coffee or tea if you've already felt a little bit like the Qin Empire. See you in the next story.